So hi, Dr. Ronnie. My name is Sim Kaisang, student ID 24040008, and I am from the Bachelor of Science Horns Marketing Program. So today, I'll be presenting my final assessment for MGT3024 Business Ethics and Sustainability. Basically, here I'm covering my presentation cover two main sections. Section 1, where I analyze the moral issue of fast fashion using the three ethicals framework, and Section 2, where I critically evaluate AI response on Malaysia waste import crisis through a 10 prompts drill down process. So without further ado, let's begin with the first section 1. For section 1, I analyze the fast fashion model using Shen as the main example. The article highlight issue of worker exploitation, environmental harm, and forced labor. I evaluate this issue using three ethical framework: Raw's primal facial duties, Kant's second formulation, and ethical relativism. And finally, I defend my own moral position. Using Raw's primal facial duty theory, I identified several violated duties. First, non-maleficent, the duty to refrain from causing harm. Sure, workers are paid just 0.03 British pound per item, forced to work 16 plus hours daily, and receive only 1 day per off month. This causes physical and psychological harm. Additionally, Shen adds 2,000 to 10,000 new styles daily, contributing to massive textile waste down or burn every second. Second, justice, the duty to ensure fair distribution. The article highlights a fundamental inequality where corporate profits are maximized while social and environmental costs are externalized to vulnerable workers. The boot theory illustrated this injustice: workers paid so little cannot offer better made profits, trapping them poverty. And third will be beneficent, the duty to do good. Rather than creating genuine value, the model exploit labor and resources. Shen claims it's minimized overproduction, yet investigation reveals massive waste that harms communities. And fourth, reparation, the duty to make amends. Shen lawyers refuse to answer parliamentary questions about forced labor, demonstrating a lack of accountability. So for consumer, a conflict emerged between self-improvement and beneficence. The scale of harm clearly override profits motivation, making fast fashion a systematic failure of moral duty. So next, I apply Kant's second formulation of categorically imperative, which states, act in such a way that you treat humanity never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as an end. Shen models constitutes a profound violation. Workers are paid British 0.003 pounds per item, forced to work 75 hours weeks that violates Chinese labor law. This condition systematically denies workers their rational agency. They cannot exercise free choice about wages, hours, or working condition. They are treated not as an independent agents, but as an interchangeable instruments of production. Consumers are also instrumentalized. The rapid turnover of 2,000 to 10,000 new style daily exploits psychological desire for novelty, manipulating consumer rather than respecting their autonomy. This aligns Grambert's dependency effects, where production creates the wants it claims to satisfy. Furthermore, documented links to her forced labor represent the ultimate denial of rational agency. Based on Kant's framework, the fast fashion model is morally wrong and requires restructuring to treat workers as ends whose dignity and autonomy are respected. I also analyze the issue using ethical relativism. Relatives might argue that fast fashion practices are acceptable in certain countries because they align with local economic norms. Low wages might be considered right in contexts where they provide employment. However, relativism has critical weaknesses. First, there will be no bias for moral progress. Second, it will be impossible to condemn exploitation. Third, David Hume's odd problem shows that the mere existence of practice does not make it morally right. Fourth, cultural diversity often masks underlying university arguments on fundamental values like justice. The documented like our forced labor violated share human rights principles. Finally, relativism is self-defeating as it asserts an absolute while denying absolutes. It's failed as an ethical guide. So after analyzing through all three lenses, I conclude that the fast fashion model is fundamentally unethical and requires systematic legal reform. Ross framework shows violation of non-maleficent, justice, and beneficent. Kant's second formation condemned the model as workers are treated merely as a means, and ethical relativism fails as a justification. Utilitarian calculations support this position. It immune suffering of millions of workers and environmental harm far outweighs cheap consumption, fleeting satisfaction. For virtue ethics, no virtuous company would exploit workers or degrade the planet. Given the systematic nature of the problem, corporate promise are insufficient. I advocate for mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence legislation and urged by the article. Strong laws require penalty companies for forced labor and prevent company election from listing on stock exchange. Now moving on to section 2, I selected a moral issue from online media related to firm pollution, Malaysia plastic and e-waste imported crisis. Here I use ChatGPT to critically evaluate the issue through a 10-prompt drill down process, applying theories from this model. So first, I started with the provided prompt, critically evaluate the moral issue in the article and explain what is the right thing to do. The AI identified waste colonialism as a central issue, but lacked ethical theory application. Prompt 2, apply utilitarianism, weighting economic benefits against environmental harm. Prompt 3 applies duty ethicals, showing firms have responsibility beyond profit. Prompt 4 use stakeholders theory, identify community, workers, businesses, and the environment as key stakeholders. Prompt 5 applies Kant's second formulation, reviewing the committees are treated as means, not ends. Prompt 6 use environmental justice, showing pollution burdens forced disproportionately on vulnerable communities. Prompt 7 challenge the difference between legal compliance and ethical responsibility. Prompt 8, critically examine economic arguments against restricting waste imports. Prompt 9, evaluate policies, opinion, total ban, moratorium, and strict regulation. And lastly, prompt 10, synthesis or perspective concluding firms must prioritize environmental responsibility over profit, while government must strengthen enforcement and accountability. So throughout this drill down, I learned several key insights. First, the AI initial analysis was descriptive, not normative. It requires specific theoretical prompts to generate ethical evaluation. Second, utilitarianism underestimate long-term environmental consequence that affects future generation. Third, Kant's framework reveals the committee's experience pollution without consenting to it, a violation of their dignity. Fourth, environmental justice show the problem is about fairness, economic benefits spread across firms, while pollution concentrates in certain committees. And finally, a temporary moratorium with strict regulation is the most balanced policy approach, but enforcement is critical. To conclude, this assessment has demonstrated that ethical analysis requires multiple theoretical lenses, not single theory fully captured the complex of moral issue in business. For fast fashion, I argue that the moral is fundamental unethical because it treats workers as mere means, violates duties of non-maleficence and justice, and relativism fails to justify exploitation. For Malaysian waste crisis, I conclude that the firm must prioritize environmental responsibility over profit, while government must strengthen enforcement. A controlled system protects the environment without limiting legitimate recycling opportunities. Thank you for watching.